Right, our topic is Sheva Brachot at the end of the seventh day. Now, the case that we're going to deal with is if somebody starts one of the festive meals connected with a wedding on the very last day, what we call the very last day of Sheva Brachos of the 7 days of celebration of the wedding. So let's say that the wedding that feast dedicated to the new couple starts before nightfall and ends after nightfall. The question is, do you say those extra blessings that are to be said usually after a wedding feast? Um, a little bit of we'd like to share a little bit of the background, discuss uh, what from the viewpoint of Reb Shlomo Kluger in his Ha'elef L'cha Shlomo, how he views this topic, and make an important chiluk, important distinction between this and another realm of halacha. Just a little bit of background. The First of all, Rav, we're learning a piece from Reb Shlomo Kluger. Uh, who was extremely, extremely prolific. This is from Ha'elef L'cha Shlomo, Elef L'cha Shlomo, because it has uh, a thousand, a thousand or so chuvas. Um, let's just make it a little bigger. Here we are. Okay. So here's his shaila. Um, Nistapakti b'chatan shaitalo, we would say shaitalo suda biyom shvi shalo. He had a wedding feast on the seventh day. Ubeponim chadashos, and he had special guests there. Just a minute, let me bring in Rabbi Yonah. So he had panim chadashos. Now I'll explain what that means. V'nimshecha sudaso ad erev leil shmona, and the meal lasted until the night of the eighth. Im mevarchim berchas chasani belayla o lo, im azlina basar azchalos asuda o lo, v'ka'es lo matzati gilui ladin zeh. So he says as follows: um, if a meal starts before the end of the seventh day and it ends on the night of the eighth, do you say those blessings, birchos, what are called birchos chasonim, the blessings of the groom at night, or not? Do you go after the beginning of the meal, which did start during the festive week, or not? And he says, I did not find anybody to reveal what the deen is in this case. Uh, and then he explains his approach. First of all, um, there is somebody uh, um, who did deal with this case. It's the tshuva ginas vradim, which is brought in the Pischei Tshuva. The only thing is the Pischei Tshuva is a contemporary of Rav Shlomo Kluger, so it could be either ginas vradim is much earlier, but this particular halacha is tacked at the end of a tshuva of the Guinness Radim, and that would have been something that very likely Rav Shlomo Kluger would not necessarily have seen or connected or remembered, and the Pischei Tshuva in his massive Bekias of Shilas and Chuvas, his massive knowledge about all the different responsives. So he brought that in at the end of Kuf Pei Chet in Orach Chaim, um, which is a discussion of the laws of Birkos Hamazon, the laws of the blessings after the meal. So first of all, a little bit of background behind Birkos Chasanim, and then why you might go this way or the other. Um, there is a blessing that is coming to the Chassan and Kala, and especially to the Kala, I will mention, we say kala below bracha asur labala kenida, that until they do the blessings, until the kala has had the blessings at the wedding, so so she's prohibited to her husband still. So at every wedding, there's two sets of blessings that go on. One set of blessings is Birkos HaErusin. Those are the blessings uh, before that precede the Kiddushin, that precede the first stage of the wedding, where the man gives the woman something of basic value, Sheva Pruta, before two kosher witnesses. He verbalizes that he's doing it to make her married to him, to make her an anxious ish. And beforehand, the blessing is stated, as the Gemara in Ksubas discusses, Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu ala arayos v'asar lana sarusos v'yitir lana sanesuos lanu al-yedei chuppah v'kedushin baruch atah Hashem mekadesh amo Yisrael al-yedei chuppah v'kedushin. That's the bless. That's what's referred to as Birkos HaErusin. Then he gives her the ring. In modern weddings, everything is done underneath the chuppah. He gives her the ksuva. They read the ksuva. He gives her the ksuva. And then they read the Sheva Brachos. Then they say, then there's a Bor Piragafen, which is blessing number one. And then the list of another 6 blessings, Yotzer HaAdam, another larger version of Yotzer Adam, and they add in Asher Bara Sasam V'Simcha Chasam V'Kala Gilurin Aditz V'Chadva, etc. So that Borei Priagafen with 6 blessings that follow it is said underneath the chuppah. Now, during that week, when there are feasts that are dedicated to the wedding couple, so there's a blessing that is said. That last blessing is said along with Birkos Hamazon, Asher Bara Sasam V'Simcha. However, if there are panim chadashot, and we're going to use a working definition of panim chadashot, of people that weren't at the wedding, but, and this will say in parentheses because it might be the matter of a dispute, people that would bring extra joy to the chas and the kala, or people that didn't hear the blessings under the chuppah. I just sort of touched on a raw nerve on this particular topic, but there are different approaches to who would be considered panim chadashos. But if during the week at one of these feasts there's somebody who is a new guest, a new participant in the festivities for the chassan and the kala, so they in that case, at the end of Birkos Hamazon, you would say Sheva Brachos. You would say Yotzer Adam, etc., Samech Chassan Makala, and end with Bor Priagafen. Now, that would be standard procedure. Now, in the modern context, again in the Ashkenazi world, the blessings are said wherever you have a feast for the chas and the kala, and you have a concept of somebody, some family, let's say, hosting what we refer to as a Sheva Brachos, but what we mean is a Suda, a feast, which is dedicated to the wedding couple, and it's celebrating the wedding couple, and if you have a minyan there, and you have panim chadashos, you have people that are new guests, so then you end with the Sheva Brachos. That's the din of Birkos Chasanim and the concept of panim chadashos. Now, the question is, what happens on that 7th day? So this particular halacha appears in an interesting place. This Pesachei Tshuva appears in an interesting place. It's a sif in the Shulchan Aruch that deals with mentioning things like Yalav Yavo in benching, in a situation where you go from a a meal that began during the day when that mentioning would be appropriate. Let's take Rosh Chodesh, and so you began in the afternoon of Rosh Chodesh to have a Suda, and the Suda lasted until after Rosh Chodesh. It's nighttime now. It started at 5 in the afternoon, and it ended 4 in the afternoon, and it ended at 8 at night. It started it started in a mamish in Rosh Chodesh, and it ended mamish after Rosh Chodesh. It was already the second of the month. So now, would you say Yalav Yavu in that benching? Let's say you have a big dinner of a charitable organization, whatever it was, and they did it on Rosh Chodesh, and sure enough, it began the hamotzi and everything began while it was still daylight out, and it ended when it was definitely nighttime. Would you say Alav Yavu in that benching or not? And we'll leave out situations where it's Shabbos going into Rosh Chodesh, going into Shabbos, Shabbos going into Rosh Chodesh. Let's forget that for the moment. A simple case. So the halacha is that you mentioned Yalav Yavu in benching. So based on that model, you might think to transfer that halacha to the Sheva Brachos and say, just like in Rosh Chodesh, if you start a meal, it's a Rosh Chodesh meal, and you finish it after nightfall, so you go after the beginning of the Suda. So similarly, it would be very natural to think that a Sheva Brachos meal that began during the week of the festivities and ended right after that week, but after nightfall, so you would also, so to speak, go after the beginning of the Suda. So the Guinness Radim and the Hayel Chasham or Shlomo Kluger says not that way. And what he's going to do is describe. He's going to speak out his reasoning, and I'd like to discuss a little bit where that is, where that's coming from. Now, he says, "Avaladati adavar pashut she'ein mevorchim." It seems to be very clear to me that you don't make that bracha. De'ena dome haskara Shabbos v'yom tov b'birkas hamazon. That doing the Sheva brachos after the meal is not like Shabbos and Yom Tov. Came the birkas hamazon akar kafta de pasmunach, so to speak. Birkas hamazon, it rides on the head of the skull of the bread. In other words, the birkas hamazon is connected with the meal that you ate. Whenever you eat bread, it's chayv b'birkas hamazon. You're chayv in birkas hamazon. In other words, the moment you ate a kezayis bread, you're chayv derabanan and birkas hamazon. When you ate a kibetza of bread or kedei svia, when you ate an amount that would satiate you, you're chayv deoraisa and birkas hamazon. But the birkas hamazon obligation stems from either the eating or the satiation from the bread. Imkain tekev keshachal kezayis bayo. When you ate a kezayis during the day, nischayev bebirkos hamazon, you were chayev in birkos hamazon behazkara. And part of the birkos hamazon, the text of birkos hamazon for Rosh Chodesh includes Yalav Yavu. V'kevan shekvar nischayev behazkara. Since you were already obligated in mentioning Yalav Yavu, that's your birkas hamazon that you're obligated on. Even though it's a different day later, so your obligation doesn't stop. Your obligation to do birkas hamazon, it still goes on, and the birkas hamazon you were obligated, that you haven't stopped being obligated on, is a birkas hamazon that has Yalav Yavu in it. And the same thing would go for Shabbos. Aval Sheva Brachos Shel Chasan Lo Chal Alav. Here are the key words. Lo Chal Alav HaChiyuv. The Chiyuv for Birkas Hamazon doesn't take effect Rak b'shazo shemevorech birkas hamazon. It only takes effect at the time when you do the birkas hamazon. Daharei lav hapas gorem kain. It is not the bread that is mechayev you in Sheva brachos. Shima yasoid kol hayom b'li panim chadashos. If you are eating all day without those panim chadashos, einu chayev levarach Sheva brachos. You don't have to make Sheva brachos, right? If you have a wonderful meal, and it was the same. The chassan, the kala, his father, his mother, everybody was at the wedding. The brothers and the best friend, everybody was there. There's no Sheva brachos. You're obligated. Shahari. Now, and then he goes further. Step 2. Gam im hayasham. Gam im hayasham b'shas suda panim chadashos. Let's say during the meal there were panim chadashos. Im b'shas birkas hamazon chalav halachlo. If they left, Uncle Jimmy that didn't make it for the wedding, so he was there at the beginning, but then he had to go. So einu chayev levarech. Rak kishiyesh panim chadashos sham b'shas birkas hamazon chayev levarech. You're only obligated to make to do Sheva brachos when there's panim chadashos at the time of birkas hamazon. Vim kain zelo chalal avachiyuv rak b'shas birkas hamazon. So you see that the obligation of Sheva brachos takes hold. It begins. It takes effect at the time of birkas hamazon. V'lo mikodem, and not beforehand. V'lachein basar shas birkas hamazon azlinan. So therefore, we go after the time of birkas hamazon. So, and by the way, the birkas, the Ginas Radim, I believe, says a similar thing. V'lo mikodem v'lachein basar shas birkas hamazon azlinan. We go after the time birkas hamazon. Lo shayich b'zel lomar shekvar kol hachiyuv alav. Oh, okay. Now, what about the other option? Let's explore the alternate option. Delo shaykh bazelo mar shekvar chol hachiyuv alav misha she'achol kazayis. You don't say that the obligation took hold when he ate a kazayis. Just a moment. You don't say that the obligation took hold when he ate a kazayis. Because you see, if the panim chadashos would leave, he's not obligated. So you can't say that the obligation, similar to Rosh Chodesh, is dependent on the bread. It's not like birkas hamazon where once you ate kazayis, you've got an obligation riding on you. That obligation exists immediately. The moment you have your kazayis, that's it. You now somebody who has an obligation. If the panim chadashos leave, so you're not obligated. V'lo matzino. By the way, this works very well with the approach of the Rambam. The Rambam holds that the whole concept of panim chadashos is for the panim chadashos to say the blessings, or to biyotze the blessings through shomea ke'ona. But if they're not there, there's no birkas chasanim. There's no Sheva brachos. There is an alternate approach that you could develop, which is panim chadashos is to increase the joy, to have an increased joy. And then theoretically you might say maybe the increased joy persists even though those people that created that extra joy left. That's a little weak. It's also a little difficult in the Gemara. The Gemara says that unless you have panim chadashos, it's afushe simcha ba'alma. It's only extra simcha, and you say only the last of the 7 blessings, the asher bar sasav simcha. Well, that seems to be saying that Panim Chadashos isn't Afushe Simcha. That the whole concept of Panim Chadashos isn't increasing joy, but that seems to be leaning towards what the Rambam says, that it's so that they can say those seven blessings that they didn't get in at the wedding. Um, so now you're going to tell me, listen, what if those people benched? Excuse me, ate bread. So they're really obligated to be part of the zimun, and so they have, so to speak, tied their fate to the bread. Ve'afim achala panim chadashos shampas deina rashai lechalek, and they're not permitted to break off because they're chayv and zimun. Mikom makom, still conceptually, lava zayin brachos garam lo achiyuv shelo listalek rakapas. It is not the Sheva brachos that is causing them the obligation not to leave. It's not that they can't leave because they're obligated in Sheva brachos. They can't leave because they're obligated because of the bread and birkos hamazon. Olav zayin brachos mitzidam hayarashai listalek. From the viewpoint of the Sheva brachos, they could leave, just like they could leave if they didn't eat bread. So, it can haim lo gormu lo hachiyuv, and so you see that it is not the bread that is causing the chiyuv. Kevin sheyesh bedo liftor atzmo v'lo chal alav ikar hachiyuv rak b'shah zu mamash mevorach sheva brachos. So the time of the chiyuv is right when the seven blessings are said. Now, so that's what he says. Now, in the next Shuvah, which we're not going to read inside, he develops how you could have the exact same thing, the exact same concept being applied on the very first day. On the very first day, so you don't need panim chadashos. But he says, let's say that first day, so the feast lasts into the night. And again, that topic is a touchy topic because the question is it on the first day or is it on the first meal? But Lu Yitzur, you were taking the approach of the first day. So if nightfall happens and they haven't benched yet, and then they find themselves on the second day benching, once again, the chiyuv kicks in only at benching time, and that's a meal of the second day, basically. So that's, again, it might have been a meal of the first day, but it's a Sheva brachos chiyuv of the second day. So he's consistent in his approach. Okay, just a couple things I'd like to add to this. Number one is there is a makor in the Maseches Sofrim, which is quoted in the Ran, and I saw it through the Vilna Gaon's commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, that seems to imply that Sheva brachos was not always tied to benching, and it sounds like they would have made Sheva brachos during the day before the feast. There was talk of taking the kala out and saying Sheva brachos in the morning. So there's a Masechet Sofrim, which is one of the Masechtos Ketanos. It's one of the large brises that are printed in the in the large Gemaras after Avodah Zarah. Um, if I remember correctly, it's the 19th chapter. So there is a source that disconnects between Birkas Hamazon, the time of Birkas Hamazon, and the Chiyuv Sheva Brachos. So according to that, Sheva Brachos is an independent Chiyuv and not necessarily tied to Birkas Hamazon. However, if you look in the Rambam brings these six plus Birkas plus Bari Piragaf and these blessings in two places in Halacha. In one, of course, it's in Hilchos Ishus, where he talks about the Sheva Brachos that are said under the chuppah, or as we would say under the chuppah, but at the wedding itself. But in Hilchos Birkas Hamazon, in Hilchos Brachos, that's where he brings the the deen of Sheva Brachos, and it's well based in the Gemara because the Gemara in Ksuvos ties speaks of the Sheva Brachos said at the in Birkas Hamazon, similar to the Birkas Chasanim said in Birkas Hamazon, similar to the Birkas Avelim said in the fourth bracha. The Rambam says like this in Perek Bet of Hilchos Brachos Halacha Tes. Beveis Chasanim mevorchim Birchos Chasanim achar arba brachos elo. After these four blessings, Hazanas Hakol, Aloratz Ve'alamazon, Bonei Yerushalayim, and Atov Yametiv. Bechol Suda V'Suda Sha'ochlim Sham, whatever meal you have there. And then he said, Brachos Shemosifim B'Virchas Hasanim, he bracha achrona misheva brachos shel nesuin. That's in now we're in Brachos Perek Beis Halacha Yud. It's the last of the Sheva Brachos. B'med dvarim amrim. When do we say that you only do the last one? Kishayu ochlim hein she'amdu b'virchos nisuim. When the people that ate at that particular meal are the same people who were there when the birchos nisuim, when the blessings of the marriage were originally said, v'shamu brachos, and they heard those blessings. Avalim hayu ochlim acherim. If there were others, shelo shamu birchos nisuim, they did not hear birchos nisuin, b'shas nisuin at the time of the marriage. Mevorchim b'shvilan achar birkas mazon sheva brachos kederach shemevorchim b'shas nisuin. You bless for them. Vehu shiyu asara. There have to be 10 there. V'chasanim in aminyan, and the chasan is counted. Now, of course, this approach of the Rambam about there's two things here. Number one is tying Birkas Chasanim to Birkas Hamazon, which I think the Reb Shlomo Kluger would find the Rambam very, very supportive in this respect. Number two, there's another issue, which is understanding Panim Chadashos merely as those who didn't hear the brachos yet. Our approach, for instance, that Shabbos itself serves as Panim Chadashos. So that is something that does not fit into this mold, right? It's not that Shabbos isn't chayiv to hear those blessings. So that's a. But in terms of the approach of the Rambam works very, very well with Reb Shlomo Kluger's presentation, as does the Gemara's connection between Birkas Hamazon and Panim Chadashos. It's interesting. There's just another tshuva that I saw in the context of seeing a lot of different things. It was by Rav Chaim David Halevi, who was the former chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, and he was asked if it's okay to leave. So the simple thing was, if it's okay to leave, somebody who was at the meal is it okay to leave before the Sheva Brachos? So the simple thing, according to Rav Shlomo Kluger, would be that the chiyuv kicks in at Birkas Hamazon. If you weren't if you weren't there at Birkas Hamazon, so you're not obligated in the Sheva Brachos. That would be the simple thing. He has an extremely interesting halacha, which is he argues with the Tzitz Eliezer. Tzitz Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg says that even though technically a minyan of people that would all have to leave early and they were going to bench early would say Sheva Brachos at the wedding, even if it's not the chassan's benching. However, he says it would cause negative energy. He doesn't use those words, but something like that. Let me just give you the quote. This is again, both of these things are very common issues to deal with, because scheduling a Sheva Brachos on that last day, you have to make sure that it's going to be in a time when the blessings will be said before nightfall. I saw in the Nite Gavriel that there are some approaches. I forgot the names. A sefer I wasn't familiar with, Vayagid Moshe, that would allow for saying Sheva Brachos after nightfall, with the assumption being then that it's not because of Hamazon that creates the obligation, but a festive seuda for the couple creates the obligation. And if the festive seuda was during the Sheva Brachos, so then that would obligate. Again, that Reb Shlomo Kluger doesn't say that, and the Ginas Radim, that's brought by the Pischei Tshuva, which seems to be affirmed. They don't say that, but the again, going back, this topic that we read, this tshuva of Reb Shlomo Kluger is quoted on a different issue of not what happens if it comes out if the end of the meal is at the night of the 8th, but what if somebody wants to leave the wedding before the Sheva Brachos of the meal are said. So it seems to him that it would be fine to be able to leave. You got to deal with Birkas Hamazon or the Chiyuv Zimun. Okay, you'll deal with that, but it should be okay. Now the Tzitz Eliezer said lehaktim levorech Birkas Hamazon v'Sheva Brachos ba'asara, but to early say Birkas Hamazon and Sheva Brachos with 10 people. Let's say you have a table of 12, four one of those square tables, 3 people on each side, and they're all part of the bus that's going back to Netanya, and they got to leave the wedding early. The bus is leaving at 11 o'clock. They still haven't said Sheva Brachos at the wedding. So there's 10 of them. They're all from Netanya. So they should... The simple thing would be that they would say Devai Hazer V'Gam Charon and Shasimcha Bimono, and they would end with Sheva Brachos. The Chassan and the Kala are at the other end of the wedding hall. Still, it's a festive meal in honor of the Chassan and the Kala, and they should say the Sheva Brachos. But the Tzitz Eliezer says Nira de lo ya'ela sotkein. It's not proper to do that. V'yatzas charam behefsei dam, and what they lose is going to overcome what they gain. The chassan and the kalam mechutanim would be makmin on that, as somebody jumped the gun and they said their own Sheva Brachos. There's a lot of problems that this could cause. Again, social problems, that's what it seems like. But Rav Chaim David Alevi says, Lo yadati makpeda yesh l'chasan l'kala mechutani b'bracha. What could bother them about this bracha? Again, I can understand certainly why somebody would be makpid, but and it is true that there is in the Shulchan Aruch brings about kapeda about a host being particular when 10 people make a break off zimun. However, that's when it's an ish nichbad v'chashuv. It's on when somebody is very very important. He's very particular that people don't break off. Uh, the Reish Galusa, the head of the exilarch. Okay. However, there's nothing wrong with that, and if there's 10 that want to leave, they should say Sheva Brachos, like I said in his earlier. But that's a very interesting spin-off of this halacha, the topic of leaving the wedding early. So what we discussed was there's a chiyuv besides the 7 blessings that are said under the chuppah. They are said also at one of the wedding feasts during the week of the wedding, during the Shivas Yemei HaMishta, the 7 days of festivities, provided that there are at that meal panim chadashos. Panim chadashos, simply speaking, new people that weren't there at the wedding. What happens if the you have a meal that's on that begins on the 7th day but ends after nightfall on the 8th day? The majority opinion, Pischei Tshuva, Rabbi Shlomo Kluger, Ginas Radim, they say that it is the chiyuv birkos hamazon that creates the chiyuv Sheva Brachos, and not the chiyuv suda, not the suda itself, not the bread. And in this way, we would contrast birkos hamazon of Rosh Chodesh that begins during Rosh Chodesh and ends after Rosh Chodesh, where you would say Yalav Yavo because the obligation was created by eating the bread. Immediately you were chayiv in Birkos Hamazon, and the Birkos Hamazon of Rosh Chodesh includes Yalav Yavo. So even though it's no longer Rosh Chodesh, later on, you were already chayiv on a Birkos Hamazon of Rosh Chodesh, whereas here, you're not yet chayiv in Sheva Brachos. How do you know? Because if the Panim Chadoshos would leave, you wouldn't have to say Sheva Brachos. Anyways, that's what I wanted to share with you. A very common issue, as well as the topic of leaving a wedding early.